After Dirty Dancing made her one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood, Jennifer Grey underwent 2 rhinoplasties and became completely unrecognizable. Her career collapsed almost overnight. But Grey wasn't alone. For decades, stars chasing youth through the surgeon's knife lost far more than they'd bargained for. Identities erased, careers destroyed, and lives that quietly fell apart. Jennifer Grey's story begins at the height of her fame. In 1987, Dirty Dancing made her a household name, her face instantly recognizable on movie posters and magazine covers. But after the film's success, Grey opted for rhinoplasty in 1989, seeking both medical relief and subtle refinement. The first procedure corrected a deviated septum, but left exposed cartilage. A second surgery, performed soon after, slimmed her nose even further without her request. The result was so dramatic that friends like Michael Douglas failed to recognize her at industry events. Grey later recalled, "I went in the operating room a celebrity and came out anonymous. It was like being erased. Casting calls stopped. Roles dried up." By the early 1990s, the same face that had once sold out theaters no longer opened doors in Hollywood. Grey's memoir, published decades later, describes those years as a time of sudden invisibility, her identity slipping away with each glance in the mirror. Lara Flynn Boyle's experience played out under the harsh glare of the tabloids. After her breakout in Twin Peaks in 1990, Boyle's angular features and dark-eyed intensity landed her a string of roles through the decade. But by the late 1990s, public appearances revealed a face altered by swelling and tightness, fueling widespread rumors of cosmetic intervention, rumors Boyle never confirmed. The media seized on every new photo, comparing her changing appearance to earlier roles. By the early 2000s, casting opportunities shrank. Headlines labeled her unrecognizable, and the scrutiny only intensified as she withdrew from the spotlight. For Boyle, the pressure to maintain a marketable image became a public spectacle, with her career caught in the crossfire. Yvette Vickers' path traced a quieter descent. Once a cult favorite for her role in Attack of the 50-Foot Woman in 1958, Vickers spent her later years in near-total isolation. Neighbors described her as obsessed with youth, rarely seen without heavy makeup or wigs. By 2010, her absence went unnoticed for months. When her body was discovered in her Los Angeles home, mummified and alone, the press pointed to a life spent chasing lost stardom and fading beauty. Vickers' story stands as a stark reminder of the industry's indifference to aging and the loneliness that can follow when recognition slips away. For each of these women, the pursuit of youth and relevance in Hollywood came at a cost far greater than any surgical bill. Their faces changed, but what vanished was something deeper, the connection between identity and recognition, the fragile currency of fame. Zsa Gabor treated cosmetic enhancement as both a shield and a calling card. By the late 1960s, she was already on record about her devotion to facelifts, eye lifts, and whatever new technique promised to keep her face ageless. Magazine profiles cataloged a running tally, 10, maybe 12 known interventions by the 1990s, each one more public than the last. Gabor joked about her surgical routines on talk shows, insisting she had never been able to age, darling. Yet behind the glamour, the cycle of procedures left her skin stretched and fragile, with visible sagging and uneven texture by her 70s. Still, she stayed in the public eye, her altered features a kind of armor against the threat of fading into obscurity. Carol Wayne's path was less defiant and more desperate. As the buxom matinee lady on The Tonight Show through the 1970s, Wayne's career depended on her looks. Tabloid coverage in the early 1980s speculated about breast enhancements and repeated cosmetic maintenance, though Wayne herself never confirmed the rumors. What's clear from Tonight Show records is that her appearances dropped off sharply. after 1982. Friends later described her fixation on beauty treatments and her growing anxiety about being replaced by younger models. Wayne's career ended abruptly with her death in 1985, found drowned in Mexico after a vacation gone wrong. The coroner's report listed accidental drowning, but industry gossip tied her decline to a relentless pursuit of youth that never delivered security. Joan Rivers never hid her relationship with the scalpel. By the 1980s, Rivers had become the face of open confession, turning her own procedures into punchlines. She admitted to multiple facelifts, eye surgeries, and a string of revisions, once quipping that her body would be donated to Tupperware. Public admissions gave her a kind of control, but the risks were real. Rivers faced infections, scarring, and botched outcomes that required further corrections. In interviews and on stage, she described the process as addictive, a necessary evil to stay on television and in the public's favor. Her relentless honesty about the costs and complications of surgery stood in sharp contrast to the secrecy that still surrounded most of Hollywood's beauty work, leaving her both a pioneer and a warning. Cher's approach to Hollywood's demands was calculated and unflinching. Through the late 1980s, while peers faded or faltered, Cher's face remained instantly familiar, her features refined, never erased. In 1987, she stood at the center of the industry with an Oscar for Moonstruck. Her image splashed across billboards and magazine covers. She spoke openly about cosmetic work, including rhinoplasty and dental veneers, but always insisted on control. In interviews, Cher dismissed rumors of extreme procedures, crediting her longevity to measured intervention and relentless work. Box office numbers backed her up. Moonstruck grossed over $80 million, and her music career surged in tandem. Cher's strategy was visibility, managing her appearance as another extension of her brand, refusing to let the industry dictate her timeline. Kim Novak chose a different path. After dominating the screen in Vertigo and Picnic, Novak retreated from the public eye by the late 1990s. When she reappeared at industry events, her face had changed, with fuller cheeks and a softened jaw, sparking public speculation about cosmetic fillers and surgery. Novak addressed the scrutiny head-on, telling reporters she wanted privacy, not a spotlight on her looks. She described the pressure to remain camera-ready as exhausting, and by the end of the decade, Novak's appearances became rare. Her own words in interviews made it clear the cost of constant visibility was too high, and withdrawal offered the only real escape from relentless commentary. Arlene Dahl, meanwhile, turned Hollywood's obsession into a business. In the 1950s, while under contract with MGM, Dahl launched a syndicated beauty advice column and later marketed her own skincare line. She became an authority on anti-aging, publishing books, and appearing on television to promote routines and products. Dahl's influence extended beyond her own career, shaping how generations of actresses approached beauty maintenance. Rather than hide or retreat, she built a market around the tools of preservation, turning industry pressure into personal enterprise. 3 women, 3 strategies, each a response to the same unyielding standards. For Cher, the answer was to adapt and stay visible. For Novak, it was to step away. For Dahl, it meant shaping the conversation itself, offering beauty as both shield and commodity. Elka Summers' legal battle in the 1990s drew a hard line between rumor and reality. After British tabloids claimed she had ruined her face with surgery, Summers sued for defamation in the High Court of Justice. The verdict came down in her favor, £25,000 in damages, a rare public rebuke of the press's power to reshape reputations with a headline. But the courtroom victory did little to erase the stain. Casting offers slowed, and Summers' later interviews circled back to the toll of scandal, not her decades of film work. Sylvia Miles's struggles played out far from legal chambers. By the late 1980s, the Oscar-nominated actress found herself fighting for visibility and for survival. Industry contacts faded as her appearance changed and roles dried up. In her 70s, Miles turned to public appeals for financial help, relying on press coverage to keep her name alive. She gave interviews about her hardships, but the stories often veered toward her looks, not her talent. The system that once celebrated her now treated her as a cautionary footnote. Hedy Lamarr's legacy offers a final bitter twist. In the 1940s, she was called the most beautiful woman in film. By the 1960s, Lamarr underwent a series of facelifts and jaw procedures, hoping to preserve the face that built her career. The operations left her features stiff and unfamiliar, fueling tabloid stories and pushing her further into reclusion. Yet Lamarr's greatest achievement, a patent for spread spectrum technology filed in 1942, went unrecognized until decades later. When the Electronic Frontier Foundation honored her in 1997, it was for her invention, not her beauty. The industry that once prized her image had forgotten her mind. One board-certified plastic surgeon, looking back on the era, put it bluntly: older closed rhinoplasty techniques often caused irreversible contour loss, a risk many stars never fully understood. For those who tried to outpace time, the price was paid in careers, in legacies, and sometimes in the loss of self. In Hollywood, the price of staying visible can mean erasing the very face that made you famous. Cosmetic intervention remains a billion-dollar industry, yet public scrutiny is harsher than ever. Today, the pressure to defy age hasn't faded. It's only found new faces. What do you think?
One stare stopped a director cold. One scene made censors panic, and one decision nearly ended her career. Jayne Simmons didn't hint. She exposed, "This isn't your grandmother's Hollywood story." War-era debut with big impact. Jayne Simmons was just 14 when she stepped onto a movie set for the first time. The film, Give Us the Moon. It was a light comedy, but casting directors noticed something deeper in her, a mix of innocence and edge that didn't feel rehearsed. By 1945, she landed a small role in Caesar and Cleopatra, acting opposite Vivien Leigh and Claude Rains. Jayne had no formal training, but her eyes stole every frame. Even with just a few lines, critics pointed her out. One review said she had more presence than most stars twice her age. That attention didn't go unnoticed. Back in London, she was already becoming a studio favorite. Directors liked that she followed direction perfectly, but still added something of her own. No one could quite explain it. She was quiet, respectful, but then delivered a performance with a surprising heat that caught people off guard. During this time, Britain was still recovering from war. Rationing was in full swing. But Jayne was getting fitted for costumes, stepping onto grand sets and showing up in magazines. For a country looking for escape, she became a symbol of post-war hope and a bit of fantasy. Producers began casting her in roles meant for older actresses. She had the look of a teenager, but the screen presence of a woman who'd lived through something. It made her unpredictable and hard to forget. The studios liked that, so did the public. What really set her apart, though, wasn't talent alone. It was how she made every close-up feel intimate. She didn't perform to the camera. She let the camera come to her. That kind of restraint, especially at 15, felt dangerous in the best way. Ophelia role that shocked all. At only 18, she was cast opposite Laurence Olivier, who also directed and starred as Hamlet. It was a bold choice. Some said she was too young, too unknown. But Olivier saw something in her others didn't. The moment the film premiered, critics couldn't stop talking. Her Ophelia was fragile but intense. The breakdown scene where she spirals into madness hit like a punch. She didn't scream or flail. She barely raised her voice, but her eyes, they told a story no one could look away from. One director on set said, "She didn't act the scene. She became it." That scene became one of the most talked about performances of the year. Some called it mesmerizing. Others said it was too much, too raw for such a young actress. The censors weren't thrilled either. They flagged her emotional scenes as too suggestive, even though she wasn't doing anything explicit. Just her face, sad, broken, and unfiltered, made people uncomfortable. Not because she did something wrong, but because she did it too well. Her performance earned her an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actress. It was rare for a British actress that young to get that kind of recognition in Hollywood, but Jayne made it look effortless. What no one saw, though, was how tightly controlled the set was. Olivier was known to push actors hard. Simmons was often left exhausted after long takes. Some scenes took over a dozen tries just to get the right version of her breakdown. She never complained. Hamlet didn't just boost her career. It showed the world she wasn't afraid of complex roles. She didn't need flashy lines or big gestures. She used silence, stillness, and just one look. This wasn't a breakout. This was a warning. Jayne Simmons didn't just belong in movies. She could change how they felt. Barefoot and bold in Himalayas. Jayne Simmons wasn't the lead in Black Narcissus, but she might as well have been. She played Kanchi, a teenage girl from the Himalayas. No lines, no backstory, just movement, emotion, and presence. And it was enough to shake audiences and critics. She wore a thin sari, little makeup, and walked barefoot in most scenes. Her performance wasn't subtle. It was bold, sensual, and totally silent. For someone trained in British restraint, she went the other way completely. Viewers couldn't believe it was the same girl from Hamlet. The censors? They freaked out. A British girl in brownface was already controversial, but it was her physicality, how she walked, how she looked at men, how she moved through space, that made it feel charged. Some scenes were almost cut. Critics didn't know whether to praise her or scold her. What made it even wilder? Jayne was only 19. She wasn't experienced in dance or physical theater. She learned everything on the spot, guided by directors Powell and Pressburger. They told her, "Don't think, just feel." And she did. The result was magnetic. Behind the scenes, Simmons was nervous. She worried about looking ridiculous. She hated the heavy body makeup. But when she saw the final cut, she realized she'd done something rare. She made people watch without saying a word. Her performance added tension to a film already full of it. Nuns fighting desire, isolation in the mountains, repressed emotions ready to blow. Jayne's character was the spark, the reminder that human want couldn't be hidden forever. She wasn't glamorized. She wasn't polished. She was raw and young and almost too real for the screen. Audiences either gasped or looked away. That role changed everything. From then on, casting directors saw her differently. She could play quiet, yes, but she could also play dangerous. Not loud or messy, but the kind of dangerous that sneaks up on you. Marriage that silenced her voice. She married Stuart Granger in 1950. On paper, it looked like a Hollywood love story. He was a big name. She was the rising star. The press called them elegant, glamorous, perfect. But the truth behind the curtain was less romantic and a lot more complicated. Granger was 16 years older. He was already famous when Jayne met him on set. Their chemistry started fast. So did the control. Soon after the wedding, Granger took the reins. On decisions, on deals, even on what roles she took. The studios loved the image. They paraded the couple in magazines. But people close to Jayne started noticing changes. She lost weight. She got quieter on set. Her fire was still there, but it felt dimmed. Granger didn't hide his jealousy. He hated how much attention Jayne got. When she was offered lead roles, he often stepped in, saying the scripts weren't right for her. Some insiders say he even turned down roles on her behalf without telling her. Their marriage became a talking point, not for romance, but for the tension it created in her career. One studio exec said, "Jayne was gold, but we couldn't get to her without going through Stuart." Still, she stayed, at least for a while. She did interviews with a smile. She played the devoted wife. But behind closed doors, she started pushing back. She wanted control over her own contracts. She wanted to work in America. Granger wasn't happy about it. The tension spilled into work. On the set of Young Bess, she reportedly clashed with crew members over last-minute changes made by Granger, who was constantly advising from behind the scenes. By the early 50s, it was clear this marriage wasn't boosting her career, it was stalling it, and Jean knew it. The girl who once shocked the screen in silence was now fighting to speak up off it. She sued Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes didn't hear no very often, but Jean Simmons gave it to him clear, firm, and without a pause. In 1951, she was under contract with the Rank organization in the UK, but Hughes wanted her for RKO in Hollywood, so he bought her contract. At first, it looked like a career jackpot. Bigger films, bigger budget, international stardom. But there was a catch. Hughes didn't want to make her a star. He wanted to own her. He sent her lavish gifts, jewelry, perfume, clothes. She sent them right back. He offered her roles, but only in projects he controlled. Scripts were delayed, promises were broken. Jean was stuck, contractually tied to RKO but barely working. Then came the final straw. Hughes tried to force her into a long-term extension. Jean said no. He pushed harder. She pushed back and sued him. That was a career gamble very few actresses would have dared to make, especially against a man with Hughes' power and reach. The court battle was ugly. She was accused of being ungrateful, difficult, spoiled, but she didn't flinch. Her attorney argued Hughes was deliberately obstructing her career, and he was. The judge sided with Jean. The court granted her the right to make one more film under RKO, but after that, she was free. That final film would be Angel Face. More on that next. The whole ordeal made headlines. Jean had taken on one of Hollywood's biggest moguls, and won. What made it wild wasn't just that she fought back, it was how calm she stayed doing it. No public outbursts, no gossip columns, just quiet, steady defiance. After the case, other actresses started to take note. Simmons had done what they were told was impossible. She stood up to the system without destroying herself in the process. Slip dress scene that stung. Angel Face was supposed to be just another noir, but Jean Simmons turned it into something unforgettable and nearly unwatchable for the censors. Directed by Otto Preminger, the film paired her with Robert Mitchum in a twisted love story full of mind games and manipulation. From her first scene, something felt off. In a good way, she wore a silk slip and moved through the frame like she knew exactly how much control she had. It was quiet, calculated, dangerous. Preminger pushed her hard. Some days she left set in tears. One scene, where she slaps Mitchum, turned chaotic. He slapped her back, for real, not in the script. The camera kept rolling. That take made it into the final cut. The most talked about scene was filmed in her bedroom. Jean wore a skimpy nightgown that barely passed code. Her expression? Cold, unreadable, hypnotic. Studio executives tried to reshoot it. Preminger refused. Simmons never apologized. The scene stayed. Critics weren't sure what to make of her. One said she was too still, too unreadable. Another called her performance the quietest form of violence ever filmed. Audiences didn't know whether to root for her or run from her. That's exactly what Preminger wanted. Off-screen, Simmons kept it professional, but distant. She didn't like Preminger's style, but she respected the result. "It wasn't fun," she once said, but it worked. She knew what the role demanded, and she gave it, without blinking. Angel Face didn't do big box office, but it became a cult classic. Directors studied it, actresses copied her stillness, and fans replayed that one bedroom scene like it was gospel. It proved she could lead a film, and terrify you doing it. This wasn't Jean Simmons the ingenue, this was Jean Simmons with teeth, and once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Backless photo stirred a storm. The robe was supposed to be a biblical epic, clean, reverent, traditional, but Jean Simmons made sure it came with a side of scandal, not because of anything in the script, but because of a single photograph. A promotional shot of Simmons in costume, barebacked, turned slightly, eyes locked on the lens, made its way into a national magazine. And suddenly people weren't talking about Roman history. They were talking about that image. She wasn't unclothed, but she didn't need to be. The curve of her back, the look on her face, it was suggestive without trying. It sparked a wave of backlash from conservative groups. Some theaters threatened to pull the film unless the image was censored. The studio quickly ordered retouched versions covering her back with added fabric. Simmons didn't protest. She also didn't apologize. What most people didn't know was that the robe marked the beginning of her freedom. It was her first film after winning her legal battle with Howard Hughes and RKO. No more interference, no more stalled scripts. She was finally in control of her career, or so she thought. Behind the scenes, she was still untangling contract fallout. Though legally free, industry politics meant many producers were hesitant to cast her right away. Her refusal to play by studio rules made her difficult. So even as The Robe became a box office hit, Jayne was still proving she was bankable and independent. She was also stepping into a new kind of role, the strong, morally complex woman. No longer the wide-eyed ingenue, she now played characters torn by faith, loyalty, and quiet desire. That's what made her stand out in The Robe. While others delivered grand speeches, Jayne did more with a glance or a pause. Staring down Spartacus with fire. By the mid-1950s, Jayne Simmons had mastered the art of subtle danger. She didn't have to raise her voice or storm into a room to command attention. One stare from her could flip the energy of an entire scene, and nowhere was that more obvious than in Spartacus. She played Varinia, strong-willed, patient, deeply loving. But she wasn't just the love interest. She was the emotional core of the film, the quiet resistance behind Spartacus's rebellion. When Kirk Douglas's character meets her, she doesn't beg or flirt. She watches, she listens, and that look, equal parts softness and defiance, spoke volumes. The film was massive, huge budget, massive cast, but Simmons never got lost in the crowd. Even surrounded by warriors and senators, her presence held steady. One key scene in a bathhouse, fully clothed but emotionally bare, had audiences holding their breath. She wasn't there to seduce, but somehow she did. Director Stanley Kubrick said she could do more with silence than most actors could with 3 pages of dialogue. And that was true. She didn't rely on flashy performances. Her strength was restraint, holding back just enough to make viewers lean in. Her chemistry with Douglas was real, on screen at least. Off-screen, things were more tense. Douglas, ever the perfectionist, reportedly tried to direct her at times. Jayne didn't bite. She followed Kubrick's lead and stuck to her style, one that didn't need constant rehearsal or rewrites, just space to breathe. What made Spartacus different was that it showed how far she had come. She was no longer being told how to act, dress, or behave. She chose this role, and she shaped it into something bigger than what was on the page. By now, Simmons had developed a signature move, holding the camera's gaze just a second too long. It was never overdone. Just enough to make the audience shift in their seats. That was her gift. Making discomfort feel beautiful. Making modesty feel provocative. Post-divorce roles, no apologies. When Jayne Simmons divorced Stuart Granger in 1960, Hollywood expected her to fade into the background. Instead, she did the opposite. She stepped into some of the boldest roles of her career. She wasn't trying to shock anyone, but she was finally calling the shots. And the first move? Elmer Gantry. In the film, she played Sister Sharon Falconer, a preacher with power, mystery, and unshakable confidence. Opposite Burt Lancaster, Simmons didn't flinch. Their chemistry felt electric, even hostile at times. Her character wasn't there to be conquered. She had her own mission and her own secrets. The role marked a shift. This was Jayne fully in control. No studio head pulling strings, no husband weighing in, and it showed. Critics called her performance chillingly calm and quietly commanding. Audiences saw a version of Simmons they hadn't before, fierce, focused, and completely in her element. After that, the walls came down. In interviews, she started to speak more candidly. She admitted how controlled her earlier career had been. She talked about being dressed like a doll, told where to sit, when to smile. "I wasn't rebellious," she said. "I just had a brain." She also started choosing roles that mirrored her real-life complexity. In Life at the Top, she played a woman trapped in a cold marriage, giving one of her most emotionally raw performances. Critics noted how much pain she conveyed without raising her voice. Simmons had always known how to make silence speak, but now it screamed. By 1964, she had officially left her ingenue past behind. Her new characters were layered, modern, and sometimes bitter, but never weak. Whether playing women burned by love or cornered by power, Simmons always brought a sharp, grounded realism. Her personal life, she kept it quiet, no tabloid stunts, just work, and that work spoke volumes. Jayne Simmons had survived the studio system, defied Hollywood men, and walked away from a toxic marriage. What came next wasn't a comeback, it was her full arrival. TV role that changed everything. In 1983, when most of her peers had faded into cameos or early retirement, Jayne Simmons made a move that surprised everyone. She went to television. And not just any TV role. She signed on for The Thornbirds, a sweeping, high-stakes miniseries that would become a cultural event. She played Fiona Cleary, the cold, emotionally distant matriarch of the family. It was a huge shift from the warm, gentle characters people associated with Simmons. Fiona wasn't cruel, but she wasn't loving either. She was closed off, wounded, and quietly ruthless. And Jayne played her with absolute control. Audiences didn't just watch The Thornbirds, they devoured it. Nearly 100 million people tuned in. Simmons held her ground against heavy hitters like Richard Chamberlain and Barbara Stanwyck, and in some scenes she stole the spotlight entirely. It wasn't just the lines she delivered, it was how she sat, how she paused, how she looked away at just the right second. For that performance, she won the Emmy. But more than that, she won back visibility. She proved that actresses over 50 weren't just background players. They could lead, they could drive a story, and they could be just as bold, if not bolder, than they'd been decades earlier. Behind the scenes, Simmons was calm, professional, and laser-focused. Younger cast members described her as gracious but guarded. She wasn't there for gossip, she was there to work. One crew member recalled, "She'd walk onto set, say almost nothing, and nail it on the first take." That role capped off her transformation, from teenage ingenue to Hollywood rebel, from silent power to full-on matriarch. She had nothing left to prove, but somehow still delivered performances that left audiences stunned. Jayne Simmons didn't reinvent herself, she just kept showing up exactly as she was, smart, subtle, and impossible to ignore. And by the time The Thornbirds aired, one thing was clear. She never needed to scream to make the whole room gasp. One was accused of sleeping with an entire football team, another got caught broadcasting bedroom footage at house parties, and yet another, she may have flirted her way into the Church of Satan. This is the Hollywood you were never meant to see. Clara Bow's scandalous engagements. She was Hollywood's first real it girl, and by the late 1920s, she was everywhere, magazines, movies, and scandal sheets. What made her stand out wasn't just her screen presence, it was how she lived, loudly. Between 1927 and 1929, Clara racked up a string of what the press called engagements. One month, she was linked to cowboy star Rex Bell. The next, to director Victor Fleming. By year's end, Gary Cooper and Gilbert Roland were also thrown into the mix, but none of these supposed fiancés made it to the altar. For Clara, the word engaged was more like interested, for now. The most explosive scandal hit in 1928. Clara became close to her doctor, too close. His wife didn't take it lightly. She filed for divorce, accusing Clara of alienating affection and dragging her name straight into court. Newspapers went wild. Headlines painted Bow as a homewrecker. Fans were stunned, but ticket sales kept climbing. In 1931, things spiraled again. Clara's former secretary, Daisy DeVoe, tried to blackmail her. She was later arrested and charged with theft, but not before leaking private letters and rumors to the press. The wildest story claimed Clara slept with the entire USC football team. Bow called it ridiculous, and no proof ever turned up, but the damage was done. Radio hosts and columnists couldn't stop talking about her. What made Clara so vulgar in the eyes of her era wasn't anything she said, it was how she acted. She wore what she wanted, swore in interviews, and laughed off public shame. In a time when studios wanted stars to act proper, Clara rolled her eyes and lit another cigarette. She didn't follow Hollywood's rules. She didn't ask for forgiveness. And she never toned it down. That attitude made her a scandal magnet and a symbol of the flapper age. Tallulah Bankhead's provocative remarks. She didn't just break the rules, but ran them over in heels. By the early 1930s, she had carved out a reputation in Hollywood and Broadway as someone who said exactly what she wanted, no matter who was listening. In 1932, reporters asked her why she took a small role in Devil in the Deep. Her answer? Tiff. That divine Gary Cooper. That was the exact quote minus the bleep. It shocked even the most jaded gossip writers. The press tried to clean it up, but the damage or the impact was already made. Tallulah didn't care. She called herself pure as the driven slush and often described her sex life as legion. At parties, she drank hard, smoked harder, and joked about sleeping with both men and women. One reporter noted she had a voice soaked in gin and sex, and audiences loved her for it. Her marriage in 1933 to actor John Emery was short, chaotic, and mostly forgotten. When asked about it years later, Tallulah dismissed it as a minor mistake, saying she was more interested in people than partnerships. Hollywood wasn't sure what to make of her. Studios tried to market her as a glamorous leading lady, but she refused to play nice. She ignored dress codes, skipped studio publicity events, and once showed up to a dinner party with no underwear on purpose. Friends said she was wild but generous. Enemies called her vulgar and out of control. Either way, no one denied she was unforgettable. She lit up rooms with a mix of charm, wit, and just enough danger to make people nervous. When asked about the censorship rules tightening Hollywood scripts in the mid-1930s, Tallulah famously said, "I can't read that Hays Code crap. I just act the way I like, and let the bastards worry about the rest." She didn't last long in big studio films, but on stage and in gossip columns, she stayed a star. Joan Crawford's alleged stag film. Before she became a Hollywood powerhouse, she was just Lucille LeSueur, an ambitious young dancer trying to break into pictures. And according to decades of whispers, that early climb included one dirty secret MGM spent years trying to bury. The story goes like this. Around 1925, before signing with any major studio, Crawford allegedly appeared in a stag film, a silent adult reel passed around at industry parties. The title was never confirmed, but rumors claimed it involved two women and was filmed in Los Angeles. At the time, she was broke, unknown, and desperate for exposure. By 1930, Crawford's star had risen fast. She'd scored leads in Our Dancing Daughters and Untamed, and MGM saw her as the future. That's when the rumors surged. Several gossip columns hinted that one of Hollywood's biggest new stars had a past indiscretion on film. Studio chief Louis B. Mayer reportedly moved fast. According to later biographies and FBI-adjacent documents, MGM paid upwards to locate and destroy all known copies. Crawford denied everything. In interviews, she called it a smear campaign. "I was never in any film like that," she told Photoplay in 1932. People love to invent stories about girls who succeed. But that didn't stop the speculation. Her ex-husbands, Douglas Fairbanks Jr. and Francho Tone, never confirmed anything publicly, but both were asked about it during their divorces. The story lingered. By the 1950s, it became an underground Hollywood myth, repeated in whispers by industry insiders and half-confirmed in unauthorized biographies. One tabloid even claimed to have stills from the original reel, though nothing was ever proven. Crawford never broke character. She kept her image sharp, her words clipped, and her past locked behind her eyes. but those old rumors stuck around, quietly circling a woman who refused to ever let them land. Lupe Velez's violent jealousy. She wasn't just a firecracker on screen, she was one in real life. Nicknamed the Mexican Spitfire, she was known for playing bold, brash women. Off camera, she lived up to that image in ways that left even her friends stunned. In 1934, she was dating Gary Cooper. Things were intense from the start. When she discovered he was secretly seeing Marlene Dietrich, she lost it. According to accounts from Cooper's valet and later biographers, Lupe chased him through his own house armed with a pistol. Stories say he jumped out a window to get away. She then stormed off and threatened to cut out Dietrich's eyes. Her love life stayed explosive. She had public relationships with Clark Gable, Charlie Chaplin, and Errol Flynn. But Lupe didn't try to hide anything. She'd speak openly about her lovers in interviews, often using their names to stir the pot. When reporters asked if she was serious with Chaplin, she said, "Only when I'm bored." That kind of comment made headlines and enemies. Another rumor circulated on one film set in 1935. She reportedly halted production for hours after accusing a co-star of flirting with her man. She screamed, cursed, and knocked over props before storming off. The director, afraid she'd quit, waited for her to cool down before rolling cameras again. Studios loved her draw at the box office, but dreaded her outbursts behind the scenes. Lupe's temper wasn't limited to romantic jealousy. Accounts said she once slapped a columnist in public for writing that her English was too broken for radio. When asked if she regretted it, she shrugged and said, "He's lucky I didn't punch him. Too cruel to be true." The public couldn't get enough. Audiences lined up for her films, not just for her comedy, but because they knew Lupe was real. Too real, some said. While other actresses polished their image, Lupe poured tequila, threw shoes, and said exactly what she thought. She wasn't vulgar because she cursed. She was vulgar because she didn't care who heard it, and in an industry built on masks, that made her dangerous. Marlene Dietrich's bisexual affairs. She had a way of walking into a room and owning it. By the late 1930s, she was a major star with a husky voice, a sharp jawline, and a reputation that didn't stop at the screen. In 1937, Hollywood insiders buzzed about her affair with Joan Crawford. While most stars hid same-sex relationships, Dietrich didn't seem to care who knew. According to film historian Kenneth Anger and several Crawford biographers, the two had a brief, intense connection that was quickly swept under the rug by studio handlers. But that was just one chapter. Dietrich's dating history read like a who's who of Hollywood, both men and women. She had flings with John Gilbert, Maurice Chevalier, and Eric Maria Remarque, but it was her romantic links to actresses like Claudette Colbert and Dolores Del Rio that raised eyebrows. At a 1938 Beverly Hills party, Dietrich kissed a woman full on the lips while surrounded by guests. People gasped. Marlene laughed. She wore men's suits to events, called herself sexless, and once told a reporter, "I dress for myself, not for men." When the Hays Code tightened rules around sexuality in film, she adjusted her on-screen roles, but her private life stayed as provocative as ever. FBI files from the early 1940s labeled Dietrich's behavior subversive. They monitored her social circle and tracked her travels, especially during World War II when she toured with the USO. Her refusal to fit the mold of a proper leading lady made her both admired and feared. Dietrich never confirmed anything. When asked about her rumored lovers, she said, "I never talk about my personal life. It's the only thing I have." Still, the rumors kept spreading because, unlike most actresses of her time, she gave people a reason to believe them. She didn't just cross lines, she erased them, quietly, confidently, and with a smile. Vivien Leigh's adulterous pursuit. She wasn't just chasing roles, she was chasing Laurence Olivier. By 1939, she was already a rising star, and he was a respected stage actor. The only problem? Olivier was married, and his wife, actress Jill Esmond, was expecting their child. Leigh didn't hold back. Anecdotes circulated that she followed Olivier to Capri while he was filming Q Planes, staying in a villa nearby. Friends said she'd find ways to accidentally bump into him around town. The two began spending long evenings together, and before long, gossip made its way back to London. Esmond, still pregnant, was blindsided. When Olivier returned home, the affair didn't end. In fact, it became more visible. At the 1939 premiere of Fire Over England, Leigh and Olivier arrived hand in hand, smiling for the cameras like they had nothing to hide. The press took notice, and the headlines were brutal. Esmond was painted as the wronged wife. Leigh was labeled a homewrecker. Olivier eventually filed for divorce, and the British tabloids had a field day. Leigh's reputation took a hit, especially with female fans who had admired her early work. In interviews, she showed little regret. She simply said she loved Olivier and wouldn't apologize for it. Her own marriage to actor Lee Holman was already falling apart, but it wasn't just infidelity that drew public scorn, it was the way she flaunted it. In a conservative pre-war Britain, discretion was expected. Leigh chose defiance. Even after their marriage in 1940, people didn't forget how it began. The Catholic Church in England refused to bless the union. Columnists referred to her as the Scarlet Woman, and studio executives worried the scandal would hurt her marketability in America. It didn't plate it. That same year, she was cast as Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, a role that seemed to mirror her real-life drama. She played it perfectly and won the Oscar. But behind the scenes, the judgment never quite faded. Leigh's pursuit of Olivier had rewritten the rules of star behavior, not because of what she did, but because she didn't try to hide it. In a world obsessed with image, Vivien Leigh let everyone see the mess and still walked away with the part of a lifetime. Jayne Mansfield's satanic tease. She knew how to work a headline. In the mid-1960s, her film career was fading, but her talent for stirring controversy was still sharp. That's when she crossed paths with Anton LaVey, the black-cloaked founder of the Church of Satan. In 1966, Mansfield showed up at LaVey's San Francisco Black House in a pink convertible. Photos from the visit show her grinning beside LaVey's pet leopard while he stood solemnly with a shaved head and inverted cross. Reporters called it a publicity stunt. LaVey, never one to shy away from attention, claimed it was more than that. Their connection got stranger. LaVey's publicist later revealed that Mansfield would call him late at night, flirt heavily over the phone, then hang up laughing while her friends giggled in the background. She reportedly signed a membership certificate for the church, which LaVey kept framed in his home. Whether she meant it as a joke or a jab is still unclear. In private, Jayne mocked LaVey's theatrics, calling him theatrical but harmless. But her link to the Satanic Church made headlines around the world. Her manager warned her to cut it off. She didn't. In 1967, things turned darker. After an argument between LaVey and Mansfield's boyfriend Sam Brody, LaVey supposedly told people he had placed a curse on Brody. Later that year, Jayne and Brody died in a horrific car crash on a Louisiana highway. Jayne died of head injuries. 3 of her children were in the back seat, all of whom survived. LaVey fueled the rumors after her death, claiming he had warned her to stay away from Brody. He never directly took credit, but the idea of a satanic curse followed Mansfield's legacy for years. Tabloids ran with it, blending fact with fiction, and audiences couldn't look away. Jayne never clarified her connection to LaVey before her death. Whether she believed any of it or just used it to stay in the spotlight is still debated. But the image of a blonde bombshell wrapped in occult imagery was too strong to forget. Even in death, Mansfield kept people talking. That was always part of the plan. Elizabeth Taylor's Fisher Affair. By 1958, she was already famous for 2 things: her movies and her love life. But the scandal that defined her came after the sudden death of her 3rd husband, producer Mike Todd. Just weeks later, she started leaning on singer Eddie Fisher for comfort. He was married to her best friend, Debbie Reynolds. The affair moved fast. Fisher began staying overnight. Paparazzi caught him leaving Taylor's house early in the morning, sparking instant tabloid frenzy. Reynolds had no idea until reporters showed her the photos. The betrayal shocked Hollywood. Public sympathy for Taylor quickly turned into outrage. When Fisher left Reynolds to be with Elizabeth, headlines exploded. Life, Time, and the New York Post all ran front-page coverage. Reynolds, heartbroken, played the victim with grace. Taylor, on the other hand, didn't bother defending herself. When asked in 1959 if she felt guilty, she told a reporter, "Debbie was never my close friend, and Eddie's boring." That quote stuck. So did the label the press gave her, homewrecker. Headlines ran wild, and church groups publicly condemned her behavior as immoral. MGM was swamped with angry letters. Some fans called for a boycott. Others canceled fan club memberships. Studios panicked. MGM had just cast Taylor in Suddenly last summer. Executives worried the scandal would tank the film. Instead, it soared. The controversy only made her more famous. Taylor and Fisher married in 1959. It didn't last. Within a few years, she left him for Richard Burton, igniting an even bigger scandal. But the Fisher affair remained a turning point. Reporters tried to trip her up, but Taylor stood firm. "I'm not a bad woman," she said. "I just love too much." Whether people believed her or not didn't seem to matter. The public couldn't stop watching. What made this scandal different was that Taylor didn't lose anything. Not roles, not status. She walked through the fire with diamonds on and came out shining. That, more than anything, is what made Hollywood call her dangerous. Diana Dors' sex parties. She was often called the British Marilyn Monroe, but she didn't just mimic the look, she went further. By the late 1950s, Dors had made a name for herself in the UK and Hollywood, not just for her roles, but for what happened behind closed doors at her home in Berkshire. In 1959, Dors and her husband, actor Dennis Hamilton, hosted parties at their mansion, Orchard Manor. To guests, they seemed like glamorous get-togethers. But many left shocked. Reports surfaced that the couple installed a hidden camera system, broadcasting live footage from upstairs bedrooms into the lounge below. Some guests were unaware they were being filmed. Attendees claimed Dors encouraged a no-rules atmosphere, public nudity, partner swapping, and open flirtation. One former friend told a British tabloid that no one left without seeing something shocking. Several guests said they were invited under normal pretenses, only to find themselves in a voyeuristic circus. When journalists caught wind, Dors didn't deny it. Instead, she brushed it off as harmless fun. In interviews, she laughed at the outrage, saying, "So what if we enjoy life a little differently?" Her nonchalant attitude made things worse. Headlines branded her the Wicked Lady. Conservative papers called her a threat to British morals. The fallout hit fast. Some producers pulled offers. Her image in America took a hit. But Dors didn't stop. Even after Hamilton's sudden death in 1959, the stories kept coming. Nothing was ever proven, but whispers followed her for years. Unlike most actresses, Dors didn't beg for redemption. She doubled down. "People can think what they like," she told the Daily Mirror. "I've never been boring." That was true. Dors blurred the line between scandal and performance, living her life as if the cameras were always rolling, even when they actually were. While others clung to studio-crafted reputations, she built hers on shock value, then dared anyone to look away. In the end, it wasn't the films that made her unforgettable. It was the parties no one could stop talking about. Marilyn Monroe's public promiscuity. By the early 1960s, she wasn't just a movie star. She was a global obsession. Her every move made headlines. But behind the platinum curls and breathy voice was a woman who lived her love life in full view, scandalizing both fans and the press. Her relationships with Joe DiMaggio and Arthur Miller had already raised eyebrows, but it was her link to President John F. Kennedy that sent the gossip machine into overdrive. In May 1962, Monroe appeared at Madison Square Garden to sing Happy Birthday to JFK. She wore a skin-tight sheer dress covered in crystals, so revealing it made national news before she even opened her mouth. The performance was slow, sultry, and unmistakably intimate. Kennedy looked uncomfortable. Jackie stayed home. The clip ran on television, was printed in papers, and immediately sparked rumors of an affair. Neither Monroe nor JFK ever confirmed it, but insiders from White House aides to Monroe's friends claimed it had been going on for months. That same year, Monroe was also rumoredly to be linked to Robert F. Kennedy. The press didn't have hard proof, but whispers spread fast. Friends said she was spiraling, calling both brothers constantly, leaving drunken messages and feeling discarded. Her insecurities ran deep. Monroe had written about her childhood abuse and abandonment in private notebooks, later published posthumously. Biographers believe those early traumas left her craving attention and approval, especially from powerful men. She once told a friend, "I get scared they'll stop loving me if I don't give them what they want." In her final months, she was frequently seen with married men and openly discussed her loneliness. The tabloids called her reckless. Studio executives called her a liability. Her final film, Something's Gotta Give, was never completed. When she died in August 1962, the rumors didn't stop. They exploded. Speculation about her connections to the Kennedys and her personal diary fueled conspiracy theories that still circulate today. Marilyn never pretended to be pure. She flirted on camera, off camera, and in front of the entire country. That openness made her iconic and controversial. While others worked to keep secrets, Marilyn let the world watch. And they did, every single time.
In the labyrinthine world of 1960s Paris, where the Seine whispered tales beneath its bridges and the streets hummed with a melody of the unexpected, there existed a paradox named Brigitte Bardot. To the public eye, she was the embodiment of glamour and sensuality, a cinematic siren whose mere presence on screen could alter the very pulse of a film. Yet, beneath this carefully sculpted facade lay hidden depths and shadows, a reality far more complex than the glossy images on magazine covers. Bardot's journey, often narrated in the language of beauty and allure, was punctuated by moments and decisions that painted a different picture, one obscured by the camera flashes. Her rise to fame was not just a tale of discovery and success. It was a path marked by choices that led her through a maze of experiences, both illuminating and dark. In the cafes and studios of a city that prided itself on art and expression, Bardot moved like a figure from a Nouvelle Vague film, her life unfolding in a series of frames, each capturing a facet of her enigma. But what lay behind those captivating eyes that gazed from the silver screen? What stories were etched in the corners of her smile, often perceived as nothing more than a symbol of seduction? As the world adored and objectified her in equal measure, Bardot navigated the complexities of fame, love, and identity. Her relationships, scrutinized and sensationalized, were more than mere tabloid fodder. They were chapters in a narrative that delved into the heart of a woman caught in the storm of her own celebrity. Yet there was a moment, a turning point that remained shrouded in mystery, a chapter in her story that veered off the expected path. It was a decision that would lead her to retreat from the very world that had made her a star, a choice that raised more questions than it answered. In the heart of post-war France, amidst the cultural renaissance that swept through its streets and alleys, a young Brigitte Bardot stepped into the limelight, her journey to icon status beginning with the subtle yet undeniable force of a sea change. Born in 1934 in Paris, Bardot's early life was set against a backdrop of a nation in recovery, a context that shaped her path in ways both visible and unseen. Bardot's entry into the world of cinema was not a tale of mere chance, but a confluence of circumstance, talent, and an era's yearning for a new kind of star. In her youth, Bardot was trained in classical dance, a discipline that instilled in her a sense of poise and expression that would later become hallmarks of her on-screen presence. The discipline of ballet, the control and grace were the undercurrents that flowed beneath her performances. Her foray into acting came as French cinema was undergoing its own transformation. The rigid structures and conventions of the past were giving way to a new wave of creativity and realism. Bardot's natural allure and unpolished acting style resonated with this shift, making her a fitting muse for the Nouvelle Vague directors who sought to redefine French cinema. Bardot's breakout role in And God Created Woman, 1956, directed by Roger Vadim, catapulted her to international fame. In this film, her portrayal of Juliette Hardy, a free-spirited, sensual young woman, challenged the traditional notions of femininity and sexuality on screen. It was a performance that captured the spirit of the times, a reflection of a society grappling with the notions of freedom, desire, and individuality. As Bardot's star ascended, so did the public's fascination with her. She became the subject of photographers and artists, her image proliferating across magazines and galleries. Bardot was not just an actress, she was a symbol of a new era, a representation of beauty and liberation that transcended the boundaries of film. Yet, the making of this icon was a journey fraught with complexities. The very qualities that brought Bardot fame also invited scrutiny and objectification. Her personal life became a spectacle, with each relationship and escapade dissected by the media. The line between the actress and the woman began to blur, a convergence that would play a significant role in her life and career. Early career pressures. As Brigitte Bardot's star rose in the cinematic firmament of the 1950s, the pressures and challenges of her early career began to cast long shadows over her personal and professional life. Thrust into the spotlight at a young age, Bardot navigated a path fraught with expectations and demands that were often at odds with her own aspirations and well-being. In the conservative climate of 1950s France, Bardot's on-screen persona, which exuded a bold and unapologetic sensuality, was both revolutionary and contentious. Her roles challenged the traditional norms of female modesty and behavior, making her a subject of admiration and controversy. The public and the press were captivated by her, but this fascination was a double-edged sword, bringing with it a relentless scrutiny into her personal life. The film industry at the time was a male-dominated arena, and Bardot, like many actresses of her era, faced the challenge of asserting her agency and autonomy. Navigating this landscape required a delicate balance of maintaining her professional relationships while also standing up for her rights and choices as an artist. The expectations to conform to certain roles and behaviors were constant, and Bardot often found herself at odds with producers and directors who sought to shape her career according to their visions. Moreover, the rapid ascent to fame brought with it an intense pressure to maintain her image and success. Bardot was constantly under the microscope, her every move, choice, and appearance subject to public opinion and media commentary. This relentless attention, while part of the fabric of stardom, also took a toll on her personal life, leading to moments of doubt and isolation. Despite these challenges, Bardot's early career was marked by a series of performances that showcased not only her beauty but also her depth and versatility as an actress. She worked with some of the most renowned directors of the time who were drawn to her unique presence and ability to bring complex characters to life. However, the path to these successes was not without its struggles. The price of beauty. By the early 1960s, Brigitte Bardot had become an international symbol of beauty and allure. However, the cost of maintaining this image was steep, both physically and emotionally, and it played out against the backdrop of a rapidly changing film industry and societal expectations. In 1963, during the filming of Le Mépris, Contempt, directed by Jean-Luc Godard, Bardot faced significant challenges. The production set on the stunning Capri Island was fraught with tension. Godard, a director known for his demanding nature, required Bardot to embody a character that was both emotionally complex and physically exposed. The role demanded a vulnerability that Bardot had to portray amidst a challenging shooting environment, often under the scrutinizing gaze of the crew and the ever-present paparazzi. The pressure to maintain her physical appearance was relentless. Bardot, known for her distinctive blonde hair and svelte figure, was constantly under pressure to conform to the idealized standards of beauty. This expectation was not just from the industry, but also from her fans and the media, who idolized her as the epitome of feminine beauty. The effort to live up to this image involved grueling hours of makeup, hairstyling, and wardrobe fittings, often under the harsh glare of studio lights. The year 1965 marked a turning point for Bardot with the release of Viva Maria, directed by Louis Malle. The film, a light-hearted adventure set in Central America, required Bardot to perform physically demanding scenes, including stunts and dance sequences. The role showcased her versatility and physical prowess, but also added to the physical strain she was experiencing. Behind the scenes, Bardot's health began to suffer due to the relentless pace of her work and the demands of her public image. She faced bouts of exhaustion and stress, which were exacerbated by the invasive nature of the press. Her personal life, particularly her tumultuous relationship with musician Serge Gainsbourg, was a constant source of media speculation, adding to her emotional burden. The culmination of these pressures led to a series of health crises for Bardot. In 1967, she experienced a nervous breakdown, a clear sign of the toll that years in the spotlight had taken. The incident was a wake-up call, highlighting the need for a balance between her career and her well-being. Relationship turmoil. Brigitte Bardot's personal life, particularly her romantic relationships, was as tumultuous and publicized as her career. Her liaisons, often with high-profile figures, were a constant source of media fascination and speculation, adding layers of complexity to her already demanding life. One of Bardot's most significant relationships was with her first husband, French film director Roger Vadim. They married in 1952 when Bardot was just 18 and Vadim was 25. Vadim, who directed Bardot in And God Created Woman in 1956, played a pivotal role in shaping her early film career and public image. However, their marriage was fraught with challenges, including Vadim's reported infidelities and the pressures of working together in the demanding film industry. Their divorce in 1957 was a public affair, adding to the scrutiny Bardot faced from the press and her fans. Following her separation from Vadim, Bardot's personal life continued to be a subject of public intrigue. In 1959, she began a relationship with actor Jacques Charrier, whom she married the same year. Their marriage was marked by intense media attention, particularly during Bardot's pregnancy. The birth of their son, Nicolas Jacques Charrier, in 1960, was a media event, with the press invading the hospital and reporting every detail. The marriage, strained by the constant public attention and Bardot's career demands, ended in divorce in 1962. Bardot's relationship with musician Serge Gainsbourg in the late 1960s further fueled media interest. Their collaboration on the song Je t'aime, moi non plus in 1967 became a sensation, notorious for its explicit lyrics and sensuality. The song, initially recorded with Bardot, was later re-recorded with Jane Birkin, but the controversy surrounding it and Bardot's involvement with Gainsbourg kept her in the headlines. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, Bardot's romantic life continued to be a focal point of her public persona. Her relationships, including a brief marriage to German millionaire playboy Günter Sachs and a longer relationship with sculptor Miroslav Brožek, were characterized by intense passion but also instability and heartache. The impact of these tumultuous relationships on Bardot's personal and professional life was significant. Each relationship brought its own set of challenges and public scrutiny, often overshadowing her career achievements and contributing to the emotional strain she experienced. Bardot's romantic life, while a source of fascination for the public, was a reflection of her search for love and stability in a world where she was constantly under the microscope. Media scrutiny and public perception. The 1970s marked a period where Brigitte Bardot's relationship with the media and her public perception reached a critical juncture. The intense scrutiny she faced from the press was both a driving force behind her fame and a source of personal distress. Bardot's every move, choice, and appearance were subject to analysis and often criticism. The media's obsession with her personal life, particularly her romantic relationships, led to invasive reporting and speculation. This constant attention made it challenging for Bardot to maintain any sense of normalcy or privacy. In 1973, Bardot's life under the media microscope took a dramatic turn with the release of the film Don Juan, or If Don Juan Were a Woman, directed by Roger Vadim. The film, which featured Bardot in a bold and provocative role, further fueled the media's fascination with her. However, the attention was not solely on her performance, but also on her personal life, blurring the lines between the character she played and her real-life persona. The portrayal of Bardot in the media often oscillated between admiration and objectification. While she was celebrated for her beauty and talent, she was also reduced to a mere sex symbol, a narrative that overshadowed her achievements as an actress and an individual. The public perception of Bardot was shaped significantly by how the media chose to portray her, often ignoring the complexities of her character and the challenges she faced. Bardot's relationship with the press reached a breaking point in the mid-1970s. Tired of the relentless scrutiny and the impact it was having on her life, she made the bold decision to step away from the film industry. This retreat from public life was a response to the overwhelming pressure of living in the constant glare of the media spotlight. The transition to activism. In the late 1970s, Brigitte Bardot, once the epitome of cinematic glamour, embarked on a markedly different path, channeling her energies and influence into the world of activism, particularly animal rights. This shift was a significant departure from her previous life in the public eye. After announcing her retirement from the film industry in 1973, Bardot's interest in animal welfare began to take a more active and public form. In 1977, she established the Brigitte Bardot Foundation for the Welfare and Protection of Animals. This move was a clear indication of her commitment to the cause, marking the beginning of her full-fledged involvement in activism. Bardot's efforts in animal rights were diverse and impactful. She was particularly vocal against the fur trade, using her public platform to condemn the cruelty involved in fur production. Her campaigns were not just limited to France. She took her advocacy to an international level, addressing issues such as the clubbing of baby seals in Canada and the slaughter of dolphins in Japan. One of Bardot's notable campaigns during this period was her fight against the hunting of baby seals in Canada. In 1977, she traveled to the ice floes of the Canadian Arctic, participating in a widely publicized protest that brought international attention to the issue. Her involvement was instrumental in raising awareness and eventually led to changes in hunting practices and regulations. Bardot's activism was not without controversy. Her outspoken nature and the fervor with which she approached her campaigns sometimes drew criticism and legal challenges. She faced lawsuits and public backlash for some of her more contentious positions, particularly those that intersected with cultural practices and industries. Despite these challenges, Bardot remained undeterred in her activism. She continued to be a prominent figure in animal rights, using her fame and resources to support various campaigns and initiatives. Her foundation became a recognized and influential organization in the fight for animal welfare, contributing to policy changes and raising awareness about animal rights issues. Brigitte Bardot's transition from film star to animal rights activist marked a significant shift in her life's focus. Her active and passionate involvement in the cause demonstrated a commitment to making a difference in an area she deeply cared about. Controversies and legal battles. Brigitte Bardot's foray into activism, while marked by her passionate commitment to animal rights, also led her into a series of controversies and legal battles that further thrust her into the public eye, albeit in a different context than her film career. One of the more contentious aspects of Bardot's activism was her outspoken criticism of certain cultural practices that she viewed as cruel to animals. This stance often put her at odds with various groups and led to accusations of cultural insensitivity. Her vocal opposition to practices such as bullfighting in Spain and ritual slaughter methods used in some religious traditions sparked significant debate and controversy. Bardot's unfiltered approach to expressing her views on these issues sometimes led to legal challenges. In France, she faced multiple lawsuits for inciting racial hatred due to her comments on immigration and the treatment of animals in certain communities. These legal battles were widely covered in the media, adding a complex layer to her public persona. In 1997, Bardot was convicted for the first time for inciting racial hatred following a letter she published in Le Figaro, a French newspaper. This conviction was a significant moment, as it highlighted the potential consequences of her often provocative statements. Despite this, Bardot continued to be an outspoken figure, unafraid to voice her opinions on matters she felt strongly about. The controversies surrounding Bardot were not limited to her activism. Her personal life and relationships continued to be a subject of public interest, with the media closely following her legal and personal struggles. These aspects of her life, intertwined with her public campaigns, painted a picture of a woman constantly in the midst of turmoil. Mental health struggles. Throughout her life, Brigitte Bardot faced significant challenges with her mental health, struggles that were often overshadowed by her public persona. Despite her glamorous image and successful career, Bardot's personal battles with depression and emotional well-being painted a starkly different picture of her life behind the scenes. Bardot's mental health issues became public knowledge during the 1960s. The immense pressure of constant media attention, coupled with the personal challenges she faced in her relationships and career, took a heavy toll on her. The relentless scrutiny and the demands of living in the spotlight led to periods of severe depression and anxiety. In 1966, Bardot's struggles culminated in a highly publicized suicide attempt. This incident was a distressing indication of the depth of her mental health issues. It brought to light the immense burden that fame and public life had placed on her, a burden that was often hidden beneath the facade of her celebrity status. Following this incident, Bardot sought to regain control over her life and health. She took steps to address her mental well-being, retreating from the public eye periodically and seeking solace in her personal life and later in her activism. However, the path to recovery was a challenging one, marked by ups and downs. The media's coverage of Bardot's mental health struggles was a double-edged sword. While it brought attention to the often overlooked issue of mental health, particularly among celebrities, it also invaded her privacy, adding to the pressures she already faced. Bardot's experience highlighted the complex relationship between public figures and the media, especially regarding personal and sensitive matters such as mental health. Retreat from the limelight. By the late 1970s, Brigitte Bardot, once the center of cinematic attention and a subject of relentless media focus, began to retreat from the limelight. This withdrawal marked a significant shift in her life, as she sought to distance herself from the pressures and scrutiny that had defined much of her career. Bardot's decision to step back from her film career was influenced by several factors. The continuous media attention and the impact it had on her mental health were significant contributors. She found the constant scrutiny and invasion of privacy increasingly unbearable, leading her to seek a quieter, more private life. Additionally, Bardot's growing commitment to animal rights activism played a role in her decision to leave the film industry. As her passion for this cause deepened, she chose to dedicate more of her time and resources to activism, a path that offered her a sense of purpose and fulfillment far removed from the world of cinema. The transition away from her career as an actress was gradual. Bardot's final film appearance was in the 1973 movie The Edifying and Joyous Story of Colin, after which she did not return to acting. Instead, she focused on her personal life and her burgeoning role as an animal rights advocate. Bardot's retreat from the public eye was a move towards self-preservation and a search for peace away from the public gaze. She spent her time away from the spotlight in her home in Saint-Tropez, where she found solace in the tranquility and privacy it offered. This period also allowed Bardot to reflect on her life and career. She had spent decades in the public eye, her image and personal life dissected and discussed by fans and critics alike. Stepping back from this world gave her the opportunity to rediscover herself away from the expectations and demands of fame. The unseen Bardot. As Brigitte Bardot stepped away from the public eye, she embraced a life that allowed her to explore and engage in interests that were often unseen and unknown to the wider public. This chapter of her life, away from the glare of the spotlight, revealed facets of her personality and passions that had been overshadowed by her celebrity status. In the quietude of her life in Saint-Tropez, Bardot found a sanctuary. Here she indulged in her love for animals, surrounding herself with pets and dedicating her time to the care and protection of animals through her foundation. This work was not just a pastime, it was a deep commitment that gave her a sense of purpose and fulfillment. Bardot also explored other interests that had been sidelined during her hectic career. She developed a passion for gardening, finding peace and joy in tending to her plants and flowers. This hobby allowed her to connect with nature and provided a therapeutic escape from the complexities of her past life. Moreover, Bardot's interest in writing came to the forefront. She authored several books, including memoirs and works on animal rights. Through writing, she found a voice that was entirely her own, unfiltered and unaffected by scripts or directors. It was a medium through which she could express her thoughts, experiences, and beliefs candidly. Despite her withdrawal from acting in the public domain, Bardot remained a subject of fascination and admiration. Her legacy as an actress and a fashion icon continued to influence generations. However, the Bardot that emerged in this later phase of her life was one who was more grounded in her personal convictions and far removed from the trappings of fame.
Born in Montana, cast as an Egyptian, fired for being too independent, praised by presidents, banned by fascists, and still she never played the Hollywood game. This isn't the Myrna Loy your grandma told you about. Born into scandal and strangeness. She was born Myrna Adele Williams on the 2nd of August, 1905, in Helena, Montana. Her father, a successful real estate man and state legislator, was respected in town. Her mother, a trained pianist, had other plans. She wanted out. She didn't care much for Helena's social rules or dusty frontier politics. When Myrna was 13, her father died of the flu while traveling. It crushed the family. Her mother packed up Myrna and her younger brother and moved them to Los Angeles. Not for better schools or family. She moved for opportunity and freedom. They landed in the Baldwin Hills area. Money was tight. Myrna was quiet but observant. She liked reading, sketching, and dancing. She joined local theater groups and took ballet. While still in school, she began working at Grauman's Egyptian Theater, not as an actress, but as a silent, still dancer in elaborate Egyptian costume. She stood on pedestals before movies played, arms out, motionless, like a living statue. She was 18 when a photographer snapped her picture and passed it to a silent film casting director. The look got her in. She lied about her experience and said she could act. Her first few roles were background, maids, servants, and unnamed extras. She didn't speak a word on camera for years. Studios didn't see a leading lady. They saw something else. Her sharp cheekbones and almond-shaped eyes got her labeled as exotic. That word would follow her through more than a dozen films. She was cast as a gypsy, a Chinese mistress, a native princess, an Egyptian dancer, even a villainous seductress in fake brownface. It didn't matter that she was of Welsh and Scottish descent. The roles were all stereotypes, and she took what she was offered. By 1927, she had appeared in almost 30 films. No fanfare, no fame yet. Just a long list of names she didn't choose and roles she couldn't shape. But she was watching, learning. She didn't talk back yet, but she didn't forget. Myrna Loy was in Hollywood, and she was paying attention. From background to breakout. By the late 1920s, Myrna Loy was showing up in everything. She didn't turn roles down, she couldn't afford to. She had no agent, no protection, and no real power. In 1 year alone, she appeared in 13 films. Most were silent, most were bad, but she was getting screen time, and that counted. In 1927, she was cast in Across the Pacific, playing a seductive spy. It wasn't a good role, but her screen presence stood out. That same year, she played a vamp in The Heart of Maryland and a native girl in The Jazz Singer, though the film is mostly remembered now for Al Jolson's blackface performance. Myrna had one line, barely lit. Still, she was there. She finally got a credit line in 1929, but that year also came with a challenge. Sound. Hollywood was panicking over the transition to talkies. Some stars couldn't handle the mic. Myrna wasn't one of them. Her voice, calm and low, translated well. She had a smooth rhythm, a clean delivery, nothing shrill or affected. Even with that advantage, the roles stayed the same.
In the 1930s The Desert Song, she played yet another veiled beauty. That same year, she appeared in The Black Watch, Cock o' the Walk, and Bride of the Regiment, still boxed in by typecasting. One critic called her a reliable foreigner. But behind the scenes, Myrna was shifting. She started making friends with script supervisors, editors, makeup artists, and anyone who could help her understand how the business worked. She learned how lighting worked, how framing changed a performance. She studied everything. Then came The Animal Kingdom in 1932. It wasn't a big hit, but she played a modern woman, sharp, stylish, and grounded. No accent, no wig, no made-up nationality. And suddenly, producers noticed. That same year, she was cast in Love Me Tonight, opposite Maurice Chevalier. She played a proper French aristocrat, not a seductress, not a threat. For once, she got to be funny, confident, and in control. The Thin Man changed everything. In 1934, everything flipped. Myrna Loy was cast as Nora Charles in The Thin Man. It wasn't a leading role at first. MGM expected the movie to center on the detective, Nick Charles. But from the first scene, Loy stole it. She played Nora with wit, timing, and absolute control. She wasn't just the detective's wife, she was his equal. She drank martinis, cracked jokes, challenged suspects, and lit up the screen without even raising her voice. She made banter look easy. She'd never done comedy like this before. Director W.S. Van Dyke took a chance on her. He was known for shooting fast and loose, sometimes wrapping scenes in one take. Loy thrived in that energy. She didn't rehearse her chemistry with co-star William Powell, it just showed up. They were instantly electric. MGM didn't expect much from The Thin Man. It was a B picture with a modest budget, but it exploded. Audiences fell hard for the married couple who flirted like teenagers and solved murders between cocktails. Critics raved. Loy became an icon overnight. By the end of 1934, she was no longer the girl who played foreigners. She was Nora Charles, and she'd finally become something rare. A woman in film who was smart, funny, and still desirable. No costumes, no seduction plots, but just sharp writing and a sharp performance. MGM rushed to lock her into more films with Powell. They made 5 Thin Man sequels over the next 13 years. Off-screen, they weren't a couple, but their on-screen dynamic was so strong that fans constantly asked if they were married in real life. Quiet battles with the studio. Success didn't make her docile. If anything, it sharpened her resolve. After The Thin Man, MGM wanted to cash in fast. But Myrna Loy wasn't going to say yes to every script they threw at her. She read them carefully. If a character lacked depth or dignity, she passed. That didn't go over well. In 1937, she turned down several roles she found offensive or boring. MGM executives, furious, suspended her without pay. Loy didn't panic. She walked out. Quietly, without a press meltdown. She left Hollywood and, years later, started volunteering with the Red Cross instead. Fans were shocked. So were reporters. Loy didn't give statements. She let the studio sweat. It worked. Within months, MGM came back with a better deal. More control, more say in scripts, and the promise of better roles. She returned on her own terms and made Parnell with Clark Gable and Double Wedding with Powell. The message was clear. She wasn't disposable. Even while under contract, she refused to be treated like property. Studios at the time practically owned their actors, controlling public appearances, interviews, even romantic relationships. Loy said no to arranged dates, photo ops, and fake scandals. She didn't pose for pin-ups or leak stories to gossip columns. She never played the game. She also kept her political opinions quiet but firm. She was a Roosevelt Democrat in a very Republican town. She donated quietly, spoke cautiously, and never used her career to chase headlines. She played it smart, but she never played it safe. Other actresses noticed. Bette Davis, Katharine Hepburn, and Barbara Stanwyck all praised Loy's professionalism. She wasn't flashy, she wasn't scandalous, but she got what she wanted without burning bridges. Banned by Hitler himself. In the late 1930s, Myrna Loy wasn't just a movie star, she was a problem. For dictators, at least. While most Hollywood actors stayed quiet on global politics, Loy spoke out, loudly. In interviews and fundraisers, she criticized Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime. She called fascism a threat to civilization and warned that Hollywood had a responsibility to say something. That didn't go unnoticed. In 1938, the Nazi government officially banned all of Myrna Loy's films in Germany. No Thin Man, no Test Pilot, no Libeled Lady. Her face was pulled from posters. Her name blacklisted. The reasoning? Too outspoken. The German press called her a bad influence. Loy didn't care. She took it as a compliment. She doubled down. During World War II, Loy turned down roles she felt undermined the war effort or American morale. Instead of playing on-screen heroes, she focused on real-world service. She refused to make movies while troops were dying overseas. From 1942 to 1945, she didn't appear in a single film. While other stars were on soundstages, Loy was visiting hospitals, writing letters to soldiers, and appearing at military bases, not as a character, but as herself. She used her fame as a tool, not for press, not for career gain, just to help. Hollywood quietly respected it, even if it didn't boost box office. MGM tried to lure her back during the war years with soft comedies and romance scripts. She said no, the work could wait. She wasn't trying to be a symbol. She just didn't believe in playing pretend while real people were dying. That's how she saw it. Years later, she said, "You couldn't be neutral. You were either against Hitler or you were for him." She stormed Washington, too. After the war, most stars returned to Hollywood. Myrna Loy didn't rush. She had other business in Washington. In 1946, President Truman appointed her to the U.S. National Commission for UNESCO, a post usually held by scholars or diplomats, not actors. But Loy wasn't just a face. She had spent years involved in global aid and education efforts during the war. Now she had a seat at the table. She wasn't there for photo ops. She attended real meetings, gave speeches, and wrote memos. In one memo to the White House, she warned that cultural recovery is as essential as economic aid. Her focus? Global literacy, women's education, and post-war rebuilding. This was uncharted territory for a Hollywood actress. Reporters didn't know what to make of it. She wore tailored suits, not gowns. She skipped red carpets and worked long hours without press coverage. One newspaper wrote, "Myrna Loy is acting like a real public servant." She was. In 1948, she joined the National Committee Against Discrimination in Housing. It was one of the first national civil rights groups to target housing segregation. At the time, that wasn't just unpopular, it was dangerous. But Loy didn't flinch. She gave speeches across the country calling redlining a moral failure and urging Congress to take action. She also met with civil rights leaders behind closed doors, offering her name, funding, and platform, but never making it about herself. Back in Hollywood, people asked if she was done with acting. She wasn't. She just wasn't done helping either. She balanced both worlds quietly, never using her activism to market her films. She refused the spotlight. While other stars chased magazine covers and gossip columns, she stayed quiet and in control. She didn't pose for pin-up spreads. She didn't do interviews unless she had something worth saying. And she didn't fake relationships to sell tickets. Studios hated it. In the 1930s and 40s, studio PR teams built entire careers on public image. They paired stars for publicity, leaked dating rumors, and staged photo shoots to make actors look more all-American or glamorous. Loy refused all of it. She never appeared in a scandal. Not once. There were no leaked affairs, no drunken brawls, no feuds with co-stars. But that didn't mean she was boring. It just meant she didn't let the public in. And people wanted in. She was known for being polite but direct. She answered questions with short, sharp replies. When asked how she avoided scandal, she said, "I mind my own business and other people's when it matters." She kept her personal life almost entirely off the record. No tours of her home. No stories about her childhood pets. Her image stayed clean because she guarded it fiercely. Even when she married 4 times, she didn't let the studios use it. Each marriage ended quietly, without headlines or drama. If reporters asked, she shut it down. This only made her more intriguing. Fans projected their own fantasies onto her. They imagined her as Nora Charles, witty, playful, madly in love. But Loy never confirmed or denied anything. She let them wonder. 4 marriages, no regrets. She got married 4 times. None of them lasted. She didn't hide it. She also didn't dwell on it. Her first marriage was in 1936 to producer Arthur Hornblow Jr. On paper, they looked like a power couple. In private, it was cold. They clashed over money, Loy's career, and how much space they needed. She left after 7 years. Quietly. Her second husband was John Hertz Jr., heir to the yellow cab fortune. They married in 1942. It lasted less than 2 years. He wanted a wife who stayed home. She wasn't that woman. Her third husband, screenwriter Jean Markey, came next. That one barely made it a year. She later said, "I got married too often because I liked being in love. I got divorced because I also liked being alone." Her final marriage was to a UN diplomat, Howland Sargent. It seemed more stable until it wasn't. They split after 4 years. Loy never remarried. In interviews, she didn't pretend to be heartbroken or bitter. She just didn't want to settle. She often said that men wanted Nora Charles, not her. They loved the version of her from the screen. The clever, loyal, flirtatious wife who never raised her voice and always had a comeback. But that was a character. Loy was sharper, more private, and not willing to play a role off-screen. She never had children. People asked her why. She said she didn't feel the need to explain. By the 1950s, she had made peace with her choices. She wasn't trying to be an ideal woman. She was just trying to be honest. And sometimes, honesty meant walking away. While the press tried to turn her love life into gossip, she stayed ahead of it. No crying interviews, no public fights, just quiet exits and clean breaks. Hollywood tried to replace her. By the mid-1950s, Hollywood had changed, and not in her favor. Younger actresses were being groomed to replace the stars of the 1930s. Studios wanted fresh faces and bigger headlines. Myrna Loy didn't fit the new formula. She wasn't scandalous, she wasn't desperate, and she wasn't willing to beg for parts. After The Bachelor and the Bobby Soxer and Mr. Blandings builds his dream house, offers slowed down, not because she lost her talent, because she aged. She was still in her 40s, still sharp, still bankable, but women in Hollywood had an expiration date, and hers had apparently passed. She refused to play mothers of grown men. She turned down scripts that treated her like background noise. She knew exactly what she brought to the screen, and she wasn't going to fake her way through a role just to stay visible. So she shifted. She started doing stage work in New York, live theater where talent, not youth, was the currency. She performed in Middle of the Night and The Country Girl. Critics praised her timing, her control, her presence. She didn't need a close-up to command a room. She also started speaking publicly about ageism. In 1955, she told a reporter, "Hollywood knows how to build a star. It still hasn't figured out how to keep one." She wasn't bitter. She just wasn't blind. Still, she made a few more films. In Cheaper by the Dozen and Bells on Their Toes, she played matriarchs, but not passive ones. Her characters had edge, opinion, and agency.
If she had to age on screen, she'd do it with dignity. Even as her screen time faded, her influence didn't. Directors still called her the most professional woman in the business. Actresses still named her as a blueprint for how to survive Hollywood without losing yourself. She didn't chase relevance. She didn't panic. She just adjusted. Quietly, as always. She walked away, without apology. By the 1960s, Myrna Loy had done what few actresses from her era could say. They retired without becoming a tabloid headline. She didn't make a big announcement. She didn't go on talk shows to explain herself. She just stopped showing up for casting calls. She didn't need to. She had made over 120 films. She had starred alongside William Powell, Clark Gable, Cary Grant, and Spencer Tracy. She had survived the silent era, conquered the studio system, and outlived the contracts meant to control her. She moved to New York and focused on activism, public service, and writing. She published her memoir, Being and Becoming, in 1987. It wasn't filled with Hollywood gossip. It was about identity, about what it meant to be watched, desired, ignored, and misunderstood all at once. In that book, she wrote, "I never had to play dumb. I just had to play it cool." That line summed her up better than any headline ever could. She still attended events when it mattered. She appeared at tributes, film preservation panels, and women's rights fundraisers. But she never tried to reclaim the spotlight. She didn't need to be remembered. She already was. In 1991, she received an honorary Academy Award for her lifetime of work. The crowd gave her a standing ovation. She didn't cry. She made a dry joke, thanked a few names, and walked off stage. Classic Loy. She passed away in 1993, quietly, at age 88. No scandal. No big final act. Just the end of a very long, very rare kind of career. Myrna Loy never gave Hollywood the version of her it wanted. She gave them the version she chose. She never posed half-naked, never leaked a romance, never faked a feud. She didn't have to. She built a legacy without chasing fame. She told off fascists, walked away from bad roles, outsmarted studio heads, and kept her private life exactly that, private. They called her the Queen of Hollywood. She never called herself anything. Because when you do things right, you don't have to explain.